You destroyed everything we had." That's the last thing he said before walking out, slamming the door so hard the photo frame on the wall cracked right through the middle of our wedding picture. Half his face, half mine, just like our love, split, incomplete, hanging by a thread. I stood there, numb, holding the edge of the table to keep myself from collapsing. Arav wasn't always like this. There was a time when he'd wait outside my office just to see me smile, when he'd stay awake all night just to talk about our dreams. But something had changed after his mother's death. He became cold, distant, silent, and I kept trying to fix it, like taping together glass that was already shattered. I begged, I prayed, I even blamed myself, but nothing worked. He'd come home late, avoid my eyes, and when I'd ask what went wrong, he'd say, "Nothing, you just talk too much." That nothing felt heavier than a scream. One night, after another fight where he didn't even bother to argue back, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until my reflection looked like a stranger. I didn't want a divorce, I wanted my husband back. That's when my cousin told me about a sage who lived near the mountains, a man people called the Listener. They said he never advertised himself, never asked for money, yet those who met him said their lives changed forever. Desperate and broken, I decided to go. The next morning, I packed a small bag and took a bus toward the hills. I didn't tell Arav. I knew he wouldn't stop me, or maybe he wouldn't even notice I was gone. The road was long, misty, and silent. My phone had no signal, and for once that felt right. By the time I reached the small town, my heart was racing, not from excitement but from fear. What if he couldn't help me? What if even a sage couldn't fix what was dead? I found his hut at the edge of a river, hidden behind bamboo trees. It didn't look holy, it looked forgotten. An old man with silver hair sat outside, eyes closed, as if he had been waiting. Before I could speak, he said softly, "You've been bleeding without a wound." I froze. "How do you know that?" He opened his eyes, sharp, calm, knowing. "Because pain speaks louder than words. Sit down." My hands trembled as I sat before him, unsure if I believed in miracles, but too desperate not to try. "I want to fix my marriage," I said quickly, my voice shaking. "He doesn't love me anymore. I can feel it. But I don't want to give up." The sage nodded slowly, as if I'd said something he'd heard 1,000 times before. "And you think love can be fixed?" he asked. "It can if both people try," I whispered. "But only I am trying." He looked into the river and said, "Then perhaps what needs fixing is not love, but your understanding of it." I frowned. "I don't understand." He stood up slowly, walked toward a wooden shelf, and returned holding an empty clay bowl. "Bring me water," he said, "but not just any water. Bring me water that tells the truth." I blinked. "What does that even mean?" He didn't answer. "You'll know when you find it." I wanted to scream. I came here for help, not riddles. But his eyes, there was something in them that made me stay silent. I left, confused and angry, walking back to the bus stand, clutching the empty bowl like an idiot. "Water that tells the truth," I muttered to myself again and again. When I reached home, Arav was asleep on the couch, phone in his hand, another woman's message glowing on the screen. "Miss you tonight." My heart stopped. My hands shook. The bowl nearly slipped. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. For a moment, I wanted to throw the bowl at the wall, to scream his name, to destroy everything like he'd destroyed me. But then something inside whispered, "Don't, this is your truth." I didn't sleep that night. I just sat by the window staring at the bowl in my lap. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I filled the bowl with my tears. I cried for every lie, every silence. Every night I waited for footsteps that never came. And when it was full, I covered it with my scarf and went back to the sage. He was waiting by the river again, as if he'd known I would come. "Show me," he said. I handed him the bowl. He looked at it, then at me, and smiled faintly. "So you found your truth." I frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means," he said softly, "you no longer hide your pain behind someone else's choices. You've accepted it as your own." He pointed to the river. "Now pour it here." "But this is my truth," I protested. "Then let it flow," he said. I did as he asked. As the tears mixed with the river, the sky suddenly darkened, thunder echoing through the valley. The sage looked up and whispered, "The storm begins when truth is released." I didn't understand what he meant, but deep inside, something felt lighter, like I had opened a wound that could finally heal. When I turned back, the sage was gone. Only the empty bowl remained. When I turned back, the sage was gone, and the empty bowl lay where he'd been sitting, still wet with my tears, glistening in the fading sunlight. For a moment, I wondered if he was even real, or if my mind had created him out of desperation. But as I picked up the bowl, I noticed something strange. Etched faintly inside were words that hadn't been there before. "You can't heal what you still blame." I froze, tracing the letters with my fingers. The words burned into me like fire. Was he trying to tell me I was part of the problem? That somehow this pain was also my doing? I didn't want to believe it. It was easier to think of Arav as the villain, the one who drifted, who cheated, who killed the warmth in our home. But as I walked back, the words echoed louder with every step. Maybe I wasn't innocent either. Maybe love doesn't die in one person, it dies in both. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the cracked wedding photo. Half his face, half mine. For the first time I realized it wasn't just symbolic, it was true. We had both broken something sacred. The next morning I decided to confront him. When he woke up, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just asked, "Do you still love her?" He looked shocked for a second, then looked away. That silence was my answer. I turned to leave, but he said something that stopped me cold. "I didn't cheat on you. Not the way you think." I froze. Then what was that message? He rubbed his face, exhausted. "It's not what it looks like. She's someone I talk to because you stopped listening." His voice cracked on the last word. My stomach twisted. "I stopped listening?" I whispered. "Arav, I begged you to talk. You shut me out." He looked up, tears in his eyes for the first time in years. "You wanted to fix me, not understand me. Every time I hurt, you turned it into a project to solve, not a wound to feel with me." His words hit me harder than any insult. For a long time, I said nothing. And then something inside me broke, not in pain, but in realization. The sage was right. You can't heal what you still blame. That night, I went to the river again. I didn't even know if the sage would be there. But as I reached the spot, he was sitting by the fire, waiting. "You've begun to see," he said before I could speak. I sat beside him quietly, my chest heavy. "He said I never listened," I admitted. "Maybe I didn't." The sage nodded. "When love becomes about being right, both hearts lose." I sighed, tears blurring my vision again. "So what do I do now?" He looked at the fire and said, "Bring me one more thing. Bring me what you fear losing the most." My breath caught. "What I fear losing?" He nodded. "And don't bring it to me until you understand why you fear losing it." His voice was calm, but something in it felt final, like the next step would change everything. I returned home, my mind racing. What did I fear losing most? Arav? Our marriage? Or myself? I looked around the house. The empty couch, the photos, the kitchen, all the places that once felt warm but now felt haunted. I realized I'd been fighting to save something that didn't even exist anymore. The version of us that once was. The truth hit like lightning. I wasn't afraid of losing him. I was afraid of being alone, of starting over, of admitting that maybe love wasn't meant to be forever. The realization tore through me like glass. That was my fear. That was my truth. For days, I couldn't move past it. I'd stare at the mirror and whisper, "What if I'm the one who needs saving?" One evening, I went to the cupboard where I kept all our old letters, the ones from when we were newly married. I pulled them out one by one, reading words that once made me feel alive, but now felt like echoes of strangers. Then I saw one envelope I didn't recognize. It had no name, no date. I opened it, and my heart nearly stopped. It was a letter written by Arav, but never sent. His handwriting, shaky and raw. "I don't know how to talk to you anymore." Every word turns into a fight. "I miss you, but I don't know how to reach you. Maybe you're already gone in a way I can't fix." My knees gave out. I sat on the floor, clutching the letter, realizing that he had tried. Maybe not perfectly, but he had tried. And I was too lost in my own hurt to see it. I cried until my eyes burned. That night I packed a small box, the letter, our cracked photo, and the ring he'd given me on our wedding day. I knew what I feared losing most. It wasn't him. It was hope. The next morning, I went back to the sage one last time, carrying the box like it was my heart itself. When I reached, he was sitting in the same spot, silent. I placed the box before him and whispered, "This is what I fear losing." He nodded slowly. "Then let it burn." My eyes widened. "What?" "If it's meant to stay, it will stay in your heart, not in your hands." My lips trembled. I opened the box one last time, staring at the memories that once defined me. Then I threw it into the fire. The flames swallowed everything. Our photo, our letters, our love. And yet, as the smoke rose into the morning air, I didn't feel pain. I felt free. The fire crackled as the last corner of the photograph curled into ash, and I stood there, feeling like I had just buried an entire lifetime. The sage watched silently, his expression unreadable, his eyes reflecting the flames. After a long pause, he said softly, "You have done what most never dare. You've faced yourself." I wiped my tears, my voice barely a whisper. "What happens now?" He smiled faintly. "Now you learn what love really is." He pointed toward the river again. "Go, look into the water." I walked slowly, unsure what he meant. The river shimmered under the rising sun, calm yet alive. I knelt beside it and saw my reflection, but it wasn't just me. I saw Arav too, standing behind me. I spun around, but he wasn't there. My heart pounded. "What's happening?" I called out, but the sage didn't answer. Instead, his voice came from behind me, deep and steady, echoing with something ancient. "Love never leaves. It only changes its form. What you were trying to fix was never broken, it was transforming. You clung to what was, instead of accepting what could be." My eyes filled with tears again. "But he doesn't love me anymore." The sage stepped closer. "Perhaps not in the way you remember. But that doesn't mean there is no love. It means the lesson is complete." I frowned. "Lesson?" He looked into the distance. "Every soul comes to teach another something. Sometimes love's purpose is to heal you, sometimes to break you open, so you can meet the version of yourself you were meant to become." I turned back to the river. My reflection now steady, my face streaked with tears but calm. I realized then that I had spent years begging for him to see me, when I had never truly seen myself. I had given everything to hold on, but never asked if what I was holding still wanted to stay. The sage placed his hand gently on my shoulder. "You have poured your truth, faced your fear, and released your pain. Now you must go home, not to fix what's gone, but to live what remains." I closed my eyes, letting the wind brush against my face. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not because I got what I wanted, but because I finally understood what I needed. When I opened my eyes, the sage was gone again. This time, I didn't panic. I just smiled. Some presences don't stay, they just guide. I walked back toward the village road, the sound of the river fading behind me. By the time I reached home, Arav was waiting by the door. He looked different, tired, guilty, human. We didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he whispered, "I thought you'd left me for good." I shook my head. "No. I just went to find the part of me that forgot how to love without conditions." His eyes softened, and for a second, I saw the man I had fallen for years ago. Not perfect, not healed, but real. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just stood there, two souls who had finally stopped fighting and started understanding. Days turned into weeks. Things didn't magically fix themselves, but they changed. The silence that once felt like distance now felt like peace. We began talking again, not to fix things, but to share them. Sometimes we laughed. Sometimes we didn't. But there was honesty now, and that was enough. One evening, while watering the plants, I saw the clay bowl again on the shelf. I hadn't noticed it since that day. I picked it up and smiled. It had a small crack running through it, but somehow it still held water. That's when it hit me. Maybe that's what love really is. Not perfect, not unbroken, but strong enough to hold despite the cracks. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I whispered a thank you to the wind, wondering if the sage could hear me wherever he was. Maybe he was never just a man. Maybe he was a mirror of truth, showing people what they refused to see. That night I sat beside Arav on the balcony. We didn't need words. The silence felt whole again. I thought about all the women out there trying to fix what's broken, not realizing that sometimes the healing begins when you stop trying and start seeing. When you stop begging for love to stay and start loving yourself enough to let go of what hurts. Because sometimes fixing a relationship doesn't mean mending the other person. It means rediscovering the person you lost inside yourself. I smiled, leaned back and looked at the stars, feeling that somewhere out there, the sage was smiling too. Maybe he knew all along that the water, the fire, the truth, they weren't rituals to save my marriage. They were steps to save me. And for the first time, I didn't want the old love back. I wanted the new me. Sometimes the person you're trying hardest to fix isn't your partner. It's the broken version of yourself you forgot to love.